Hey guys! We're Seth and Annika, and welcome back to our channel.
If you're new here, don't forget to press the subscribe button and the little bell beside that so you get notified when we post a new video.
So for today's video, we'll talk about John List, our family man. So before we start, we would just like to warn you that since this is a true crime channel, we will be talking about the murders and facts of the case. We will also show some pictures that are related to the case, so viewer discretion is advised.
So John List was born on September 17, 1925 in Bay City, Michigan, and he was the only child of a German-American couple named John Frederick List and Alma Barbara List. So his childhood was pretty much normal, like any other childhood, but he did have a very religious upbringing because his parents were both devoted Lutherans. When he grew up, he also became a devoted Lutheran and also became a Sunday school teacher.
So in 1943, he enlisted in the army to serve as a lab technician during the World War II. 3 years after his service in the military, he enrolled in the University of Michigan and he took up a degree on business administration, and then afterwards, after completing that, he took up a master's in accounting. In 1950, he was recalled again to serve in the military for the Korean War. So he went to Virginia, and there he met Helen Morris Taylor, who was a widow of an officer who was killed in battle. So Helen lived nearby with her daughter, and in December 1, 1951, just a year after, dating and hang out, they got married just 1 year after. So after they got married, they moved to Northern California, and when they moved there, he was reassigned to the finance division because the army saw that he was good with numbers.
So after he served in the army again in 1952, he worked in an accounting firm in Detroit. And then after working in Detroit, he worked as an audit supervisor in a paper company in Kalamazoo. Also, in Kalamazoo, that's where 3 of his children were born, which were Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick. Bye!
Sorry, he wanted to leave.
And then in 1959, he became the general supervisor of that company's accounting department. So around that time, Helen was an alcoholic and she became more unstable. So she was a drinker. In 1960, her daughter, Brenda, got married and moved out. She said bye. List was like, let's also move out. So they moved out to New York so that List could take this job at Xerox. So by now you could see that he's taking up a lot of jobs. And then in 1965, he accepted this job as a VP in a bank in New Jersey. And in that same year, the List family moved into this 19-room Victorian mansion. 19 rooms.
What are you gonna do with 19 rooms?
A lot of kitchen. I don't know.
You're gonna eat breakfast in one room, lunch in another. Hey, let's have dinner in the
dinner room.
1 room per meal. So now let's get to the part where everything went down. So after being the VP of this bank for like 6 years, in 1971, he lost his job due to personality clashes, which was very common in his other jobs. Like that's why he kept jumping jobs, jumping from one workplace to another because he didn't really go well with his coworkers. So he always had to bye. So the people in his VP job thought that he was cold person and had a rigid personality, and he really didn't have any friends anywhere. So after losing this very prestigious job, VP, he lied about it to his family. So he told his family he didn't tell his family he lost the job, and then for a period of time he pretended that he was going to this job. So he gets up early in the morning, gets ready, and then tells his family that he'll go to his work. But in reality, he was just at the train station reading his newspaper the whole day. Great decision. So the reason why he didn't tell his family was because he was so embarrassed about it, and he didn't want his family to know how much of a failure he was. Because, what he said was, and I quote, "I grew up with the idea that you should provide for your family, and to do that, you had to be a success in the job that you had, or you're a failure. and that was not a good thing to be. So, oh, end quote. So, he didn't wanna make his family think na, ay, ano ba yan? Di naman to okay na tao. Char. So, yeah, he didn't want his family to think that he was a failure, so he just said, I'll lie about it. Remember, they bought a big house. So it was on mortgage. Since he doesn't have any job now and no income, he took money from the bank of his mom just to pay this.
So finally, in November 9, 1971, he killed his whole family. He actually planned to do it on November 1 because it's All Saints Day and he thought it was the perfect day for them to go to heaven. But his plans got delayed. So this is how it happened. So he packed his children off for school like any good father would do, and then he took his 2 handguns to his car to load them instead of like going to a random room in his house, I guess. And then after loading his guns, he calmly went back inside the house, went into the kitchen where Helen was sipping her morning coffee, and shot her in the back of the head. So after he shot Helen in the back of the head, he went up to where his mom was and shot her above the left eye while she was eating breakfast. Like, girl, let them finish! So after he killed Helen and his mom, he went to the post office to stop the So after he killed Helen and his mom, he went to the post office to stop the mail, the milk, the newspaper, anything that is being delivered to their house. And he also called at the children's school to say that they wouldn't attend for a while because they are going to visit Helen's sick mom. Actually, Helen's mom was really sick. She was going to visit them in Westfield, but since she is sick, she canceled. If she did come, she would have been the 6th victim.
So you see, like, he really planned this, and it wasn't a spur of the moment, oh, I can't do this anymore. But he took the time to, plan it out, like, talagang step by step, what will I do so I don't get caught.
So after that, he returned home and dragged his wife from the kitchen to the ballroom. He didn't drag or carry his mom's body because her body was in the 3rd floor and
in the attic, right?
Yeah, in the attic. He said that her body was too heavy for him to bring down. He just left her there.
So after planning everything out, he can't carry his mom.
After he dragged Helen's body to the ballroom, he cleaned everything up. He cleaned the kitchen, the trail, and he made himself lunch.
From what I read, I think he made himself a sandwich for lunch. How can you do that? Kill everyone and then make a sandwich?
Did it say what's inside the sandwich?
I haven't. I can't remember. I'm so sorry. I didn't read up on that. But yeah, that's some next level, psycho
brain.
You have to be this specific kind of person to be able to do that.
So his children were at school during that time, and when Patricia and Frederick got home, he also shot them in the back of the head. But for John Jr., it was a little different because he was the favorite child, and what he did was he went to the school and watched his soccer game. He even cheered him on.
This was after he killed everyone else.
So when they were driving home, John Jr. didn't catch on to anything because List was calm, showing no emotion. And then when they got home, List also shot John Jr. in the face and the chest 10 times. And the reason why he shot him a lot of times was because John Jr. was said to be resisting and running away. So he wanted to make sure that he was completely dead. So after he killed all of his children, he moved their body to the ballroom and put them in sleeping bag beside their mom.
Like, how can you stand seeing your whole family dead?
Yeah,
So after killing everyone, what he did next was say a prayer. He made a sandwich, he went to the soccer game of his son, and then he prayed. How? How can you I don't know. I can't. I And then after praying, he wrote a 5-page letter to his pastor, and he enumerated in that letter all the reasons why he killed his family. And he said that he knows that killing his family was sin against or against all the teachings of the church, but just to save them from becoming non-Christians. So here are some of the reasons that John listed. So one of the reasons that he said was, since there is no money coming in, he had no job, he was scared what poverty would do to his children.
So he killed them instead.
Weigh them, guys. Weigh them. Death, or and also, he was too proud to, get the welfare benefits from the government or whatever you call that. If you lose your job, you get some money to help you raise your family. Like, he was too proud for that, so he just decided to kill everyone instead of getting help. Guys, get help. People are willing to help you, promise. For the next reason he stated was that Patricia's passion for acting was a corrupt passion or a corrupt occupation. So he was scared that Patricia would be swallowed by this corruptness. So he decided that it was best for him to kill her. Okay, so another reason in the letter was he was upset Helen stopped going to church and she said that she wanted to leave the church. You can discuss, not kill. Why don't you want to go to church? Oh, it's because choo. And then you solve that.
Break it out.
Oh my God. He said in his letter that he was certain his family is in heaven now. In the letter, here are some words that he said, so I'll quote them. I know that many will only look at the additional years they could have lived, but if finally they were no longer Christians, what would be gained?
So, he means that if they continue to live and they weren't Christian.
Parang he's scared that they will be separated from his beliefs. So, instead of them sinning or, doing stuff against the teachings of his church, patayin ko na lang sila. Okay, so another quote from the letter is, also, I'm sure many will say, how could anyone do such a horrible thing? My only answer is, it isn't easy and was only done after much thought. So yeah, you thought about it. So in the letter, he also said the reason why he planned to shoot everyone at the back of the head, but, failed with John because John resisted. He said he shot everyone at the back of the head because he didn't want them, their last thought was, why would my dad or my son or my husband do this to me? He didn't want that as their last thought. So I just think he didn't want his family talaga to know that he was a failure nga, and so he just stopped their life without knowing that he failed at his job but being fired or losing your job isn't really what makes you a failure. But you killing your whole family, yeah.
The children could have had a lot going in their life. Frederick was just 13. Oh, side note, Patricia is 16, John Jr. is 15, Frederick is 13. So after all of that, he cut off his face from all of the family pictures or any pictures inside the house. After doing that, he turned down the thermostat so that the decomposition will not be that fast. And he turned on the radio and turned on all of the lights and opened the window so that it looks like there's still people alive inside the house. So their neighbors got a little suspicious because their lights were burning out one by one and they didn't see any movement in the windows. So they decided to call the police. But they know that family was not there or out of town. So they just did an outside search and they didn't find anything, so they just left it. Whatever. And then after that, the neighbors called the police again. And when the police got to their house, they saw Patricia's drama teacher outside calling out for her.
Patricia! That's so weird. Patricia! Okay, he might be dead.
Her drama teacher convinced the police that they go through this small window that leads to their basement because the door was locked and the windows were also locked. So that was the only open window. And that's when the bodies were discovered. So they discovered their bodies a month after, on December 7, 1971. The police also said that when they went inside the house, they were hit by this very disgusting, horrible smell.
Do you wanna know what or how decomposing bodies smell?
I don't want to know that.
I'm scared to know. Okay, I don't wanna know.
So after that, the police did a national manhunt for this guy that killed his whole family. But since there were no pictures and there were just a few evidence at the house, they couldn't really find him. But they did find the family car outside of JFK Airport in New York City. But they didn't find any evidence that List boarded a flight or booked a flight or rode a plane. It was just there. The car was just there.
So after List murdered his whole family, he got like a month head start because the bodies were only discovered a month later. So he was able to flee the mansion or like the scene of the crime right away. So he was able to get away from the police.
On August 20, 1972, the 19-room Victorian mansion got burned down by arsonists, including a signed Tiffany stained glass skylight that was worth $100,000 in 1971.
So in today's money, it's around $640,000, and you convert it to our money, pesos. It's around 31 million in today's money in pesos.
That's expensive.
Yeah, like how many can I buy with that? How many chicken nuggets?
Chicken nuggets. So Alma's body was flown to Michigan, and the kids and Helen were buried in Fairview Cemetery in Westfield. I don't know why they're separated, but they are.
So they learned that he traveled from New Jersey to Denver, Colorado via train and bus, and he just put his family car in the JFK Airport parking to throw off the police and, like as a red herring. So when he got to Denver, Colorado, he got a new social security number and registered as Robert Peter Clark, or Bob.
Bob.
Okay. So after setting his new identity, he took an accounting job in early 1972. So, it's very close lang from when he murdered his family because it was in November of 1971. So, early 1972, he already got his new identity. His new identity, Bob Clark, came from his former classmate. But when Bob Clark, the real one, was interviewed or asked, he didn't know of any John List. So, I think he just heard of the name and got it. Also, he joined a Lutheran congregation, and it was in that congregation, in one of the religious gatherings, he met his new soon-to-be wife, Dolores Miller. So in 1985, they got married, and 3 years after, they moved to Midlothian, Virginia in 1988. There in Virginia, he resumed his work as an accountant. In 1989, in May, America's Most Wanted featured this episode on John List, or the List murders, and this was 18 years after the murder, so they had no idea what John List looked like. They only had this picture as reference. You can see, this is the only picture that they had. So they asked a forensic artist named Frank Bender to make an aged sculpture of John List. And what they did to get this image, Frank Bender consulted a psychologist named Richard Walter to come up with a psychological profile of John List after 18 years. Bender and Walter predicted how John List would have aged using a psychological profile that they came up with together. In this profile, they said that John List was a man who killed out of anger and retaliation because of his own failure. This affected also how he would have looked. They also considered the genetics of his parents, so they looked at an old picture of their parents. Here. They looked at an old picture of their parents and saw that the jowls of their faces drooped down. So ito yung sa pisngi, this side.
Like that.
So it's like
that.
Like that. So it drooped down, so that could have played a part in how John List would have looked like. And also that because of the burden of his murders, like the anxiety and the fear of getting caught, like his mouth would have been shaped like this. Yeah, so
downward.
It's downward.
He's frowning.
So they predicted what John List would have worn as glasses in that time. So they said it would have been thick frames, like yung very, very thick. So it would have been a different style from what he was wearing before. This was so he could hide the fact that he was a failure and to make him look more intelligent, like to deceive other people of his being. Also, the artists and the psychologists believed that at that time he would have been wearing a suit and tie to make him look professional and accomplished. So after airing this episode in America's Next Top Model, so after airing this episode in America's Most Wanted, an old neighbor of Bob Clark recognized this bust and said, "Oh, that looks like my old neighbor," So she called the FBI and said, "Oh, I think this looks like my old neighbor. You should check him out." And then the FBI went and looked for John List.
So after the old neighbor called the FBI, they arrested Bob Clark on June 1, 1989 in an accounting firm he worked in Richmond. Even though he was already arrested and even after the extradition to New Jersey, he still stood by his alias of Bob Clark. Like, he kept saying he was Bob Clark and not John List. But when they did arrest Bob Clark, they saw that he coincidentally had the same scar in the back of his right ear. And his fingerprints also matched the ones List had for his gun permit application from a month before he committed the murders. The glasses he was wearing were also exactly the same as the glasses they predicted he would have worn. So,
great job, Bender. Great job, Walter.
So after all of the evidence that was seen and even the evidence from the crime scene, Bob Clark confessed his true identity as John List on Feb 16, 1990. He was also diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder or OCD. We're not saying that if you have OCD, you're automatically a killer or psycho. It's just that he had OCD. So, on April 12, 1990, he was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder and he pled insanity. He said, I quote, "I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding, and prayer."
How could you be insane if you planned everything? Doesn't match.
What?
De.
No.
De.
No. He also said that his judgment was affected by having PTSD from his service in the military. But even after he said all of that, the judge was unpersuaded and said that John Emil List was without remorse and without honor. Let's go, judge. So he was eventually sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms in prison, and that was the maximum sentence at that time. And then in 2002, Connie Chung interviewed him, why didn't he take his life after killing his family? Because most people that kill their family would take their life too. And he said it would have barred him from heaven, which he expected for him to meet up with his family.
Yeah, but isn't you killing your family gonna bar you there? We know for sure he's in hell. In March 21, 2008, at the age of 82, John List died of pneumonia. What a very,
natural way to die.
And like, not as... I'm so sad talaga for their family. Like,
they don't deserve that.
So he died in Trenton, New Jersey, and then he was buried beside his mom, which I think is not a good move.
If I was a mom and I was murdered and then I came back to life,
I would move the body of my son somewhere else, like where prisoners are buried, or like criminals, like very bad people. And that was the case of the List murders. So I hope you enjoyed the first story that we put out, or like we discussed. And if you like the video, you can press the like button there. And if you want to see more of these, you can, again, press subscribe if you haven't.
And if you have some suggestions or some cases that you want to hear, you could just leave them in the comments below.
So thank you for hanging out with us and, listening to us tell the story of John List.
So we'll see you on our next True Crime Thursday at 4 p.m.
Bye!
Yay!